Dear friends, reaching the age of 60 means we are gradually moving closer to the final turn of life's cycle: birth, aging, illness, and death. Whether we like it or not, the time we have left in this world is getting shorter with each passing day. Some debts can be repaid, but there are those that we might never have the time or energy to make right. After the age of 60, there are 4 types of debts you absolutely must avoid. 1. First and foremost is financial debt. Imagine this Mr. T was rushed to the hospital, but when he reached for his savings, there was nothing left. He had lent all his money, the money he had set aside for his old age, to a friend in need. Now, when he needed it most, his friend couldn't, or wouldn't repay him. Mr. T shared that he and this friend had been like brothers, colleagues who had worked together for years. Before retiring, his friend faced financial difficulties and asked for a loan. Mr. T, with over 100 million VND sitting in the bank, didn't hesitate. He withdrew the money and handed it over without any paperwork, trusting in their friendship. His friend promised to return it in a few months, but years have passed, and the debt remains unpaid. When Mr. T needed money for medical expenses, he reached out, but his friend either made excuses or didn't respond. Eventually, the friend returned a fraction of the money, but with resentment, saying, "I'm also unwell and can't even afford to see a doctor, yet you keep pressing me for money." Other times, when Mr. T had urgent expenses, like home repairs or family obligations, his calls went unanswered, and when he visited his friend's house, he was met with discomfort and hostility. The debt, which started as a gesture of goodwill, has now soured a once cherished friendship. Dear friends, as we age, we value our relationships more than ever, and it's natural to want to help loved ones financially during tough times. However, no matter how close we are, lending money can strain even the strongest bonds. Many families have fallen apart over unpaid debts. To avoid the heartache of chasing after borrowed money, it's best to be cautious from the start. Consider the borrower's ability to repay before lending. If you have doubts, it's better to say no or only lend a small amount. Be especially wary of promises of high returns or vague business plans. If a loved one needs money for urgent matters like buying a home, a wedding, or medical expenses, help in a way that suits your family's financial situation. And if you're the one borrowing, make sure you have a plan to repay. Remember, in old age, beyond pensions and savings, income is often limited. If you find yourself unable to repay a loan, communicate openly. Don't just stay silent and hope the issue will go away. A lack of responsibility can fracture relationships, and in the end, money and material gain will overshadow what truly matters. Your reputation and dignity in old age are far too valuable to lose over unpaid debts. 2. Second debt, debt of responsibility. Now, let me share with you a story that reminds us of the profound responsibility we all bear in life, particularly within the bonds of marriage and family. Mrs. H had spent decades in a marriage filled with loneliness, despite having a partner. Her husband, Mr. L, was a man who shirked his responsibilities, both to his family and to the marriage itself. For years, Mrs. H shouldered the burden alone, rising early to cook meals, taking the children to school, and struggling to make ends meet. While she worked tirelessly, her husband spent his days at leisure, eating out and enjoying himself with friends, never once considering the strain his actions placed on his wife and family. When their children entered university, the financial demands grew even greater. Each semester, Mrs. H faced the daunting task of gathering enough money to pay for their education. Yet, whenever she turned to her husband for help, he responded with anger and gave only a fraction of what was needed, forcing her to borrow money and scrape by however she could. Despite her attempts to reason with him through both gentle conversation and heated arguments, Mr. L remained resolute in his refusal to contribute, fearing that any money he gave might end up supporting her side of the family. For a long time, Mrs. H considered divorce but hesitated, thinking of the impact it might have on their children. Mr. L, sensing her reluctance, only grew bolder in his disregard for his duties. But one day, Mrs. H had an awakening. She realized that staying with a man so devoid of responsibility could only harm her children, teaching them to follow in their father's footsteps. So once her children had graduated, she made the brave decision to leave. Mr. L, confident that his wife couldn't survive without him, signed the divorce papers with a smirk. But Mrs. H, stronger than he ever imagined, took her children and left, severing all ties with her past. She changed her phone number and moved away, determined to build a new life free from the shadow of her former husband. She wanted Mr. L to experience the loneliness he had subjected her to reflect on the years he had squandered by being so careless and unloving. In the years that followed, Mr. L's health began to decline, the result of his reckless lifestyle. Suffering from cirrhosis, he found himself alone, unable to reach out to the family he had neglected for so long. Shamed, he returned to his hometown, relying on relatives to care for him. It wasn't until 4 years after the divorce that Mrs. H returned to her hometown with her children, who visited their paternal family. By then, Mr. L was filled with regret, finally realizing that his negligence had cost him the very people he loved most. Dear friends, life places responsibilities upon each of us, especially within the sacred bonds of marriage. As spouses, we must work together, building a life side by side, staying loyal to one another. As parents, we must nurture our children with love and care. As siblings, we must support each other through life's challenges, sharing both joy and sorrow. Only when we fulfill these responsibilities can we look forward to a future filled with the love, respect, and happiness of those around us as we grow old. 3. The third debt, the debt of kindness. There is an old saying, if you become a prominent official, your family fortune will dwindle. If you become wealthy, your money will disappear, but if you are kind, you will survive great calamities. In the early 1950s, my family lived in a mountainous region in the Northeast. My parents were simple, good-hearted people who made a living by farming. They didn't earn much, but compared to others, our life was relatively stable. At that time, many city dwellers were moving to the countryside to cultivate land, hoping just to have enough to eat and avoid starvation. It was during this period that a man named Mr. Bach came to our village. He built a simple house in the mountains and spent his days clearing land and farming. However, his house eventually collapsed, making it uninhabitable. He then sought refuge with his foster daughter, who lived in the village. But soon after, she also drove him out of her house. Mr. Bach was 73 years old, unable to work, and had no money. During the day, strangers passing by would invite him to their homes for a meal before he continued his journey. At night, they would offer him a place to stay for the night, telling him to move on the next day. Everyone in the village knew my parents were kind and always treated others well. So when Mr. Bach learned of this, he came to our house and pleaded with my parents to let him stay through the winter, promising to find another solution the following year. Seeing how pitiful he was, my parents agreed to his request. Although Mr. Bach was not a relative, we all lived together happily. My parents took care of him as if he were one of our own. But the good times didn't last long. Mr. Bach fell ill and couldn't get out of bed. My parents did everything they could to care for him. He was deeply moved, saying that he had found good people and promised that if he recovered, he would repay their kindness the following year. If he died, he would repay them in his next life. Mr. Bach asked my father to write a letter to his younger brother. My father reassured him not to worry, saying that he would recover soon and that the bad luck associated with turning 73 would pass. However, as time went by, it became clear that his condition wasn't improving. One winter morning, Mr. Bach passed away, unable to survive the cold season. Sometime after Mr. Bach's death, his younger brother came to our house to take him away but was too late. He thanked my family for taking care of his brother, saying, "My brother left too soon. Thank you for your kindness. In his next life, he will reincarnate as a white buffalo to repay your great kindness." This little girl, referring to my sister, who was about 8 or 9 years old at the time, may meet that white buffalo. My parents heard this but didn't take it seriously, As there were only black, water, and yellow buffaloes at the time, no one had ever heard of a white one. A few years later, my sister's family raised a buffalo. To everyone's surprise, it gave birth to a white calf. The white buffalo, still wet from birth and unsteady on its feet, stood up and walked towards the mountain path, heading straight for a stream. Along the way, it passed by 7 or 8 graves without stopping, finally halting at Mr. Bach's grave, where it stood for a long time. My sister tried to stop it but couldn't, and it wasn't until my nephew came back from the fields that they managed to bring the calf home. This white buffalo grew into the best of the herd, strong, healthy, and prolific, giving birth to a calf every year that could be sold at a high price. My parents passed away within the last 5 years, both at the age of 91. People say they lived long, peaceful lives because of the kindness they showed during their time. 4. The fourth debt, the debt of time. At over 50 years old, with 2 grown children who have both graduated and secured stable jobs, my life might seem like a picture of success. We were a family built on love, a love that began in our school days and blossomed into marriage. My husband, a good man, has grown increasingly eccentric over the years, often distancing himself from others. He takes pride in his wealth and status, sometimes to the point of looking down on others. While I've come to accept this, there's something far more troubling. Our emotional connection has been broken for the past 4 years. He no longer shows affection, not just to me, but even to our children. At times, it feels like he believes his presence in our family is a gift, a favor bestowed upon us. As time went on, my children and I found our own joys, gradually excluding him from our lives. I sought comfort in my children, their kindness and accomplishments becoming my source of solace. My husband, a private business owner, is always busy, often away on business, even on weekends. I understand that he's working hard to provide for us, and he has always been generous with both our family and his extended relatives. But despite this, I often feel a deep sadness, a loneliness that grows stronger, especially during holidays and even on ordinary days. We are no longer truly a couple. I feel more like a housekeeper in his life. Last year I retired, and now I spend most of my days at home, where the nights feel even lonelier, the silence even more profound. My dear friends, money can buy a house, but it cannot buy a home. It cannot buy the laughter of children, nor the joyful face of a loving wife. Money cannot heal the wounds in a child's heart from a lack of parental care. It cannot erase the loneliness felt by a wife, nor can it prolong the warmth of a family gathered together. Time is fleeting, and it is the most precious gift you can give to those you love. Don't let time slip away, leaving behind a debt that can never be repaid. Spend it with your loved ones more than you think is necessary, because you never know how much time you have left to care for them, to share with them, and to cherish them. Don't wait until it's too late, when all that remains is regret for the time you can never get back.
If you find these stories inspiring and they motivate you to take action, please comment 9. If not, comment 0. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time.
Part 2. When you retire, never give such things to your children, especially after 70 years old. In an era where familial bonds are often tested by the pressures of modern life, the story of Mr. Bernie challenges our understanding of parental love and expectations. Imagine devoting your entire life to raising and supporting your children, only to find yourself feeling forgotten and unappreciated in your golden years. Mr. Bernie and his wife, once devoted parents who spared no effort or expense to give their sons the best possible start, now find themselves at a crossroads. Their tale is a poignant reminder that while parental love knows no bounds, it must sometimes confront the harsh realities of changing family dynamics. Dive into this compelling narrative to discover why Mr. Bernie chooses to safeguard his retirement savings, prioritizing independence over unconditional support, and what it means for retirees navigating similar emotional and financial dilemmas. However, there are exceptions. Mr. Bernie from our neighborhood is not like this. He and his wife were once civil servants, earning good salaries and saving a lot of money. Now, both are retired, and their combined retirement pensions add up to over $5,000. Despite this, they haven't given their children a single penny since retirement, which puzzles people. While other parents are eager to give their children money, they firmly refuse. What could they be thinking? Let's hear Mr. Bernie's story and understand the reasons behind this. Mr. E. Bernie says, I'm 72 years old this year, retired for 12 years. My wife is 5 years younger than me and has also been retired for over a decade. We both worked in state-owned enterprises, so our combined monthly pensions exceed $5,000. With such retirement funds, we live comfortably, enjoying whatever we want and traveling as we please. We don't hold back on ourselves. After working hard for half our lives, retirement is a time to enjoy life. Despite our comfortable situation, we've never spent a penny on our children. Some might ask, with such high pensions, wouldn't we have some money left each month to support our children? After all, young people have it tough, and parents should help them. However, my wife and I prefer to keep the money for ourselves, even if it depreciates, rather than spend it on our children. He continues, our actions aren't heartless. We've observed our two sons' behavior, which has left us cold. My wife and I struggled in life and know how painful poverty is. When our lives improved after entering public service, we were very caring and loving towards our two sons. However, we had boundaries. We spared no expense for what they needed but firmly refused to spend on what they didn't need. Perhaps due to my educational philosophy of being tactful and moderate. Both sons have always performed well since childhood. They excelled academically and were admitted to prestigious universities. They graduated, found employment in major cities, got married, and had children. Everything was smooth and stable. Many people admired us, saying we raised them well. Our sons became white-collar workers in big cities, achieving success in their careers. Mr. Me and Bernie adds, although both sons were outstanding, my wife and I did a lot to help them build their families and careers. After our eldest son graduated from college, we arranged for him to work in a state-owned company recommended by someone we knew. When he got married, we paid the down payment for his new house, about $100,000 US. Later, when he bought a car, we sponsored $5,000. As for our younger son, his major in college was relatively unpopular, making it difficult for him to find a job after graduation. So, we spent money to send him for further studies. He didn't secure a stable job until nearly 30. When he got married, he married a woman from another province, and we spent over $500,000 US on his dowry. Moreover, we bought a house for both brothers, spending all the savings we had accumulated over half a lifetime. Mr. Epol. Bernie shares later they both had children, so my wife and I retired early to take care of them. My wife retired at 50 to care for our eldest grandson, and I retired at 60 to care for our youngest granddaughter. It wasn't until the two children started school that we could rest. We can be said to have given everything for our two sons, giving our all. We thought that with our selfless dedication, they would eventually take care of us. But in the end, there was no filial piety, only a desire to live off us. Generally, where there are old people, there's a home and children should come home often to visit. But our sons are different. They rarely come home during festivals and seldom call. Our eldest son lives just 300 km away. Only a 4-hour drive, yet he only comes home once a year, usually during the Chinese New Year. Each time he arrives empty-handed and leaves with gifts. I remember one year Mr. Bernie recalls, while neighbors' children brought bags of goods and gifts for their parents, our eldest son was extremely stingy. He drove his SUV home but only brought 2 pieces of clothing for my wife and me, without any New Year gifts. While other children give red envelopes to their parents on New Year's Eve, our eldest son never did. Only the grandchildren were thoughtful enough to give us their red envelopes. Before the new year was over, our eldest son would leave. clearing out the New Year goods we prepared for the family. That year, I felt that our son and daughter-in-law were too much, so I said a few words to them. My son replied, "Anyway, you're both so old now, you can't eat so much, and it's a waste to leave things at home." Mr. D. Bernie continues, our younger son was even more excessive. When we bought a house for him, he asked for money to buy a car. When he asked for money, his tone was like that of a bandit, directly saying, "Dad, I want to buy a car, quickly transfer $7,000,000 to me." Do it now. I felt very uncomfortable with this demanding attitude from my son. It made me feel like he thought he was the father and I was the son. So I refused. Although we could afford to give him $7,000,000, I didn't like my son asking for money like that. Especially when he already had a car, buying another one would be a waste. Mr. Bernie explains later when he couldn't get money for the car, he found other ways to ask for money, saying he needed it to renovate the house or start a business, asking for tens of thousands each time. But I saw through his intentions and only gave him a little money each time. Unexpectedly. Because I refused to give him money, my son began to treat us poorly, as if we had wronged him. Every time he came back, he was cold and indifferent, leaving as soon as he finished eating, even when we asked him to stay longer. He heartlessly refused, saying it was uncomfortable staying at home. Gradually, Mr. Bernie notes, the actions of our two sons made us increasingly cold-hearted. 4 years ago, my wife was hospitalized due to osteoarthritis. Although the medical expenses for surgery and treatment were covered by us, my wife wished for our sons to visit her. However, both sons avoided visiting like they were avoiding a plague. None of them came back, as if visiting their mother would cost them money. In the end, both sons only made a simple phone call and showed no real concern. What was originally a simple operation caused my wife a lot of pain, not physical pain, but emotional pain. While in the hospital, other patients were accompanied by their children, but we only had each other, which was quite pitiful. Mr. Bernie continues, later, when my wife was still recovering, I accidentally fell and fractured my foot. At that time, my wife's back was not good, and she couldn't take care of me. I wanted our two sons to come and take care of us, but they kept making excuses. One said he was busy with work, and the other claimed he wasn't feeling well. Despite explaining the seriousness of my condition, they both said they couldn't come. Helpless, I spent money to hire a caregiver. However, during my recovery, I found out through my grandchildren that my eldest son had taken his family to the seaside for a vacation, and the younger son had gone hiking. Knowing all this made me feel more heartbroken than physical pain. After experiencing such things, Mr. Bernie reflects, people ask if we still need to give our savings to our sons. That's why my wife and I gradually let go of our sons, no longer relying on them and no longer pinning our hopes for retirement on them, because we are still alive and able to take care of ourselves. If they treat us so heartlessly now, it would be worse if we couldn't take care of ourselves in the future. Therefore, we decided to firmly hold on to our money, not giving our sons a penny. Even in emergencies, we will reserve enough retirement funds for ourselves. If we can't take care of ourselves in old age, we won't rely on our sons, but will go to a nursing home together. Although a nursing home lacks the warmth of family and personalized care, I believe that buying services with money will be more comfortable and enjoyable than relying on our sons. Perhaps Mr. Bernie's situation is rare, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. In today's society, human emotions are as thin as paper, and familial affection is not what it used to be. Especially now, young people pursue freedom and self-enjoyment, and it's rare to find someone completely filial to their parents. So, when we grow old, we must hold on to our retirement savings tightly. If children are in trouble, we should help, but not too much. Everyone must experience the ups and downs of life, and children should face their own trials. What we can do is help them within our means when they are in trouble. Many elderly people think about helping their children raise their grandchildren after retirement. But nowadays, many young people prefer to raise their children themselves and are unwilling to let their parents take care of them. If they don't have grandchildren to take care of, retirement life can be boring. If there's enough pension, life might be manageable, but without it, people can become anxious about earning more money. Many people are still young at 60 and can work for another 5 or 6 years. So what kind of work can they do after retirement? Today, I'll share with you 4 types of jobs that retirees can still engage in. 1. The first type is community security. Many community security guards are retired elderly people. If you're retired and in good health, you can apply to be a community security guard. In the community where I live, several security guards are retired seniors. They sit in the security booth every day, reading newspapers and helping press a button to open the gate when someone comes by. The work is relatively leisurely. When looking for security work, try not to aim for high-end communities, as they may have strict management and may not hire retired seniors. It's better to look for opportunities in medium to low-end communities. However, security work usually involves night shifts. My uncle became a security guard after retirement and had to work night shifts, which can be tiring. Be mentally prepared for this. To find security work, it's best to have someone you know introduce you. If you don't have connections, inquire at the community property management office. 2. The second type is being a nanny. Mrs. Carroll, 52 years old, retired 2 years ago with a monthly pension of over $1,500. Her husband passed away many years ago, and her only daughter is still studying for her master's degree. Since Mrs. Carroll's parents are healthy, she felt unfulfilled doing odd jobs like working at a supermarket or watching over stores. She decided to explore other options. One day, she was sitting on a bench downstairs, lost in thought, when she chatted with an old acquaintance who mentioned his inconvenience due to his current situation. He could still take care of himself, but his only daughter was married and had children elsewhere, and he didn't want to trouble her. He considered hiring a live-in nanny but thought it unnecessary, instead looking for someone to cook and clean weekly. Mrs. Carroll realized there might be many elderly people like him in their community and decided to become a new type of nanny, not living in but offering assistance as needed. She posted messages in her community group offering her services to cook for the elderly or help young people who needed assistance. To her surprise, she received inquiries from 3 elderly people's children that night. She started by cooking meals according to their preferences and delivering them. Eventually, she expanded her services to include cleaning and accompanying them to medical appointments. After more than a month, Mrs. Carroll noticed a growing demand for such services among the elderly, who often felt neglected by their families. They didn't just need material support, but also desired companionship and understanding. Her interactions with the elderly taught her the importance of empathy and communication. She realized many elderly people wanted someone to listen to them and appreciate their stories. Over time, she provided practical assistance and emotional support, enriching her own life. After 6 months, she invited former colleagues to join her, forming a small team to provide similar services, creating a supportive environment for both the elderly and themselves. 3. The third type is setting up a small stall to sell goods. If you have some savings, you can buy a small cart and set up a stall at the entrance of supermarkets or malls to sell fruits or snacks. This is a form of self-employment, albeit with some financial risk. It's not advisable for retirees with limited funds, as failure is possible. However, for those who enjoy independence and have spare cash, it could be worth a try. If you have a garden and grow your own vegetables, you can sell your produce at the stall. 4. The fourth type is working as a dishwasher in a restaurant. After retirement, women may not be able to work as security guards like men, but they can consider dishwashing in restaurants. My aunt found a dishwashing job after retirement, working at a restaurant during lunch and dinner hours, with the rest of the day free for rest. However, the pay may not be high. Similar jobs include hotel cleaning staff positions. After retirement, if you need extra income, it's possible to find work. Having money provides a sense of security, and being financially independent is important for retirees. However, it's crucial to find low-intensity work to avoid overexertion, which could lead to health issues. Retirement should focus on enjoying life, with earning money as a secondary consideration. Even if you don't have much money, living a simple life and saving can still sustain you. Lastly, I wish all retired friends a happy and fulfilling retirement. Remember, you're never alone in this community.
If you find these stories inspiring and they motivate you to take action, please comment 9. If not, comment 0. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time.